Hello everybody and welcome to the stream tonight. Yes, I'm again horribly late. Thanks for hanging in there. I had work to do, relatively surprisingly. And then I had to get a quick workout in and get a quick shower. And now I'm ready to do the show. So tonight we are recording a private citizen on the topic of cyber war. I'm going to lay some InfoSec groundwork here for coming episodes. But before we do anything else, 2 days ago, Terrestris Jim subscribed to the channel with Prime, which is great. He or she might not be watching. I'm guessing it's a he, but still. Thank you, Terrestris Jim. You are a very special terrestrial Jim. I thank you from the bottom of my heart. With this horrible song. Thank you. But let's get to it here. Let's do like we always do. Ooh. Oh God, that just almost broke everything. That almost stopped the whole thing cold in its tracks. Right. Desktop microphone. We are recording. Hello. What? Maybe I should zoom in a little bit. Hello. Okay. Let's play. Play Sting. Billy bang, down. That actually looks good. That looks amazing. Maybe my mic is a little bit. I'm clipping a little bit. So let's turn that down a little bit. Recording. Hello. Wait, what? Maybe I should zoom in a little bit. Hello. Okay. Let's play. Play Sting. Billy bang. Okay, that seems to be all working. Everybody, by the way, I am recording a podcast. So if somebody comes in and doesn't know about this, you might as well do the ! Podcast command. What that just means is that I'm not interacting like I usually am. I will just be recording the podcast tonight. And then I'll kick you over to another streamer. Because after that I need to get it out ASAP. It's already very late. And then I have a story to write as well. So I'll be up until deep in the night. But tomorrow, from sometime in the afternoon, I'm gonna stream games for maybe about 10 hours. And then on Friday I'm gonna stream the whole day. And then on Saturday, maybe about another 8 hours of streaming, I think. I'll be streaming Flight Simulator, I'll be streaming The Witcher, I'll probably be streaming Valheim, and I'll definitely be streaming Escape from Tarkov. So there should be something for everybody in the next 3 days. Just wanted to mention that, just so you know. But without further ado, let's record this podcast, shall we? Let's try if we can get this done. Okay, here we go. Recording. What the hell was that? No, That didn't. I don't know what that was. Why is it doing that? Right. Okay, that's better. Right. Let's start recording here. Here we go. You're listening to The Private Citizen. Well, I'm not happy with how I faded that. Do that again. I'm still getting used to. I changed the setup a little bit, so Still getting used to that. All right. To fade that more, maybe to 12, minus 12. Okay, let's do that again. Here we go. You're listening to The Private Citizen, defending your right to have something to hide. This is episode 60 for Wednesday, the 17th of March 2021. Cyber War. Hello everybody, my name is Fab and I'm coming to you live from the burned out husk, from the wasteland, the capital city of the German federal state of North Rhine-Westphalia. I'm coming to you from Düsseldorf, where I'm the last person alive. No, I'm not really, but if you turn on the news, it kind of sounds like it. So let's leave the news off and let's do our own research and think for ourselves here. Today, we are gonna talk about, that's a little bit of a cybersecurity, cyber, I'm gonna put that in the headline for them mad SEO clicks. A little bit of info security topic. I want to talk about cyber war, what it means, and all that jazz. So settle in, grab yourself a beverage. I have a grog, which is a traditional northern German drink. It's rum with sugar and a lot of hot water. And I like to put a little bit of nutmeg in it to give it some extra spice. Anyway, that's what I'm drinking. I hope you got yourself a beverage as well. And let's get into the topic. So why am I doing this? I'm going to talk today about cyber war, basically hacker attacks, what they are, a little bit of history, and then basically what the term cyber war means, if it actually means anything, if it's actually a usable term. And I'm doing this because I have some other episodes planned. I want to talk about, Mike prompted me on a show where he was a guest, my friend Mike, prompted me to do an episode about this whole SolarWinds stuff. There was this exchange exploit we just had. And, before I want to talk about that, there's always, cyber attacks, hacker attacks, Russian hackers. It's always in a headline somewhere. And before we want to do that, before we want to get into that, I want to lay some groundwork. So this is going to be a little bit of an educational episode, a little bit like, the socialism episode I did at one point. And I hope you'll enjoy it. But before we get into that, we'll actually have to talk about another topic that was prompted by some producers and listeners of the podcast. So during this week and like end of last week, beginning of this week, for some reason, a lot of people got in contact with me over various ways. A vast majority of them listeners of the show, asking me what I was thinking about the vaccination and the SARS-CoV-2 vaccines, if I would take it. And for some reason, it seems to be important to people to get my opinion. Of course, I'm not an expert in this topic. I think that goes without saying if you've listened to the show before. But of course, I've talked about SARS-CoV-2 a lot. We've talked about the coronavirus. We've talked about the pandemic. We've talked about a lot of things. Connected to that, we talked tangentially about the vaccines because I talked about the vaccination passport basically, and so I guess that's why people are interested. So I'm going to give you my opinion here. It's important to state that this is my opinion. This is not medical advice. I would never give medical advice. I'm not a doctor. I'm not even a biologist. I'm married to one, but that's about it. I talk to a lot of doctors, but I don't want to give you any advice. But this is my personal opinion, and it's kind of, I think, important to the show, because we talked about the sociological, political fallout from this, the fallout on our society. So I think maybe connecting that up with what I actually think about this vaccine or vaccines in general is maybe useful to give you some context. So before, another disclaimer I want to kind of make is that this is my opinion. It's not even the opinion of my wife. Of course, I talk to her a lot. Some of the people who contacted me were apparently under the opinion that she is a doctor, as in a medical doctor, which she's not. My wife's a biologist. She has a PhD, so she has a doctorate in Germany. She is a doctor. She's a Dr. Reanat, as we call it, a doctor of the natural sciences. Her doctorate is in cell biology. And she works with doctors, but of course she's not a doctor. But I think I personally think she's more qualified than most medical doctors on this topic. But that's also my personal opinion. But this is also not her opinion. This is just what I've gotten from, talking to her over the years, talking to her colleagues, talking to friends of mine. And so I am personally not at all against vaccines. I'm far from an anti-vaxxer. My parents were kind of critical, about vaccines. So when I was a kid, I just got the, basically the necessary vaccines, the ones you needed to get to go to school or whatever. The ones they're basically forcing on my parents. I have since then, I went to Australia in the year 2000 to have a year, to spend a year in high school there. And to go there, I mean, this is something that isn't new. The vaccination passport, this kind of idea that you need to get vaccinated to travel isn't new. So I had to apply for a student visa in Australia. And if you do that, you have to get a relatively large number of vaccinations, including I don't know, what's it, Ross River fever or something, really extremely unrealistic that you would actually get that disease. I mean, it occurred once in some place in Western Australia, 20 years ago. At the time I was going, it was 20 years ago or something. It's relatively rare. And, that I would get that in a town in Queensland was unrealistic. But, I had to get some vaccines. I never had any, any side, well, you always have, not always, sometimes you have some side effects. For example, when I took I took several combo vaccinations, and the last shot I took was the day before I was flying, and it was an intramuscular shot in the ass muscle. My right ass, how do you Germany we say Arschbacke, ass cheek, right? My right ass cheek just swelled massively the next day, which was relatively inconvenient, as I was, having I don't know what it was, 32-hour flight. We were flying to LA and then on to Sydney, and it was extremely uncomfortable. But hey, that was about the worst I've ever got. And so I'm not against vaccines at all. I think it is important to understand. This is also my opinion, but I think it's well founded actually in scientific research that you take a vaccine to be safe yourself from a disease. This whole idea that you take a vaccine to protect others is something that is not very well supported in the scientific literature. I know that that used to be a thing. That it's a well-held belief with scientists, and almost at a propaganda level for the WHO, I would say, that certain diseases have been eradicated using vaccines. It's just very hard to prove that. I think it's not that easy. I think it's relatively, I mean, they certainly played a role, I think. I don't think you can globally eradicate a disease by vaccinating people. Because I think you can never have that level of vaccination, even if you have internment camps and force people. And I don't think it works. And I think that is a relatively new idea that I object to. I think a vaccination is something you do for yourself to protect yourself, and I feel it should and generally, like any medical procedure, I firmly believe people should be able to choose themselves. There are certainly situations when you can't, when you're like, I don't know, get shot in the head and they bring you in a hospital, right? And they'll presume that you want to live, which I'm okay with. But, if you're still there, if you have your mental faculties, I think people should decide. I'm also I'm a firm believer on the side that I think people should be free to die in certain situations if they want to. I don't think suicide should be illegal. I think it shouldn't be frowned on. Looking at situations like Terry Pratchett, one of my favorite authors, who knew he was getting a very bad case of Alzheimer's. He knew what was going to happen. And he wanted to decide to end his life on his own terms, after writing a few more books, which was amazingly courageous of him, I think. I think we should allow that. I'm completely for abortions. I think it's a woman's choice what to do with a baby. I don't think anybody has I don't even think the father has the final say. The mother has the final say. If the father and the mother don't agree, I think the mother has the right to go over the father's head. I certainly don't think anybody in the family, anybody in the public, or anybody in a church should be able to tell somebody what to do on that point. So I'm generally pro-choice of anything, and I'm the same with vaccinations. I think it should be absolutely in the hands of the person at stake, right? If they want to say, I want to take it for reasons, take it. If they don't, they don't. You have the public at large has no right to tell them, I believe, what they should or should not do. Especially when it's extremely questionable. If this whole argument, you're protecting other people and we need to protect the vulnerable, even if that doesn't really hold up in our current scientific data that we have. If you're looking at that with some diseases, yes, there's an argument to be made. I don't think with respiratory viruses that argument is at all there. Even if we were completely sure that we could save thousands of people, I think it should still be the decision of the person. I think that's paramount. It's their body. They can decide what to do with it, I believe. I believe that with many things, right? I believe that with tattoos, for example. I have many tattoos. I think they're great. There are people who absolutely think one should not get a tattoo. I think, they're fine to think that, but, they're not. They shouldn't tell me, right? If somebody says that to me, I'm like, fuck right off, right? It's not your decision. You can do with your body whatever you want. I mean, you can tattoo the inside of your eyelids if you like that. Completely up to you. I wouldn't do that. I don't like piercings, for example. But if people want to do that, go for it. So that's my groundwork here. I personally, so I object generally. I don't object to vaccines. I think they're good. They're good common sense. I think you should use common sense when to take them. And I just object to people being forced or being, there's, as we talked about on the show, there are different levels of force, right? There's putting people in a camp and putting a gun to their head. There's making it illegal not to be vaccinated. And there's just pressure, right? There's you can't use public transport if you're not vaccinated. You can't fly if you're not vaccinated. Any of that, I think, shouldn't be there. I think we should make this vaccine available for everybody who wants to take it, and then leave all the other people in peace and let them travel, for God's sake. So with that in mind, I personally, if that were the situation, if the political landscape, so that's also what I told all my listeners, right? With maybe a little bit less disclaimers, but I think for the general audience, this is important. I think if that was the situation, if everybody was thinking that way, I wouldn't get vaccinated. I'm 37. In my age group, if I get this virus, the chance to die from that is exceedingly small. It is incredibly small. I ride a motorbike, several times a week. I used to do it every day. I'm just not going anywhere so much. So, but let's say every day, my risk to die from that is much higher. there's many other diseases I could die from, probably liver disease or something. I'm going to die from something else, I'm pretty sure. So I would just go leave the vaccine for people who really need it. I'm just going to for me, if I get the disease, I'm going to isolate. I'm going to try to not give it to anybody. I'm going to get sick and I'm going to get over it. And it's the same end result as getting vaccinated. And there's probably not much risk in me getting the disease. So I would be okay with that. Now, it looks like I'm going to have an episode at some point about the laws. I mean, the EU is today, they're introduced some kind of law. I think I haven't looked into it. I didn't have time today. But I will. It looks increasingly like the population in general thinks we should incentivize people to get vaccinated by not letting them travel, right? Not letting them travel or something, or go to restaurants or whatever. I like traveling very much. I think it's very important. I think it's one of the important things a man can, or a woman, or anybody can do. I think it broadens your horizon. I think people should go into different countries and see what different people do, and I like to see the world. So I'm foreseeing a situation where I won't be able to travel until I get vaccinated. Now, I object to this whole incentivizing / forcing people to do it. And I would like to make a statement, but I don't think these kind of statements do anything. It's like boycotting a huge companies, like me not buying an iPhone because I object to what Apple's doing in a certain. I don't think that works. And I like traveling so much that I'll just, if I can, I'll just get the vaccine, get it over with, because I don't think there's a risk, right? Of course, I think the risk is like me getting COVID, from getting a SARS-CoV-2 infection is minimal. It's negligible, and I think the risk of getting any serious health issues with the vaccine is even smaller. Of course, there are risks, and people get issues, and people will die. That's just the case with anything. I think the problem is people can't judge risk at all. I mean, I've talked about this on the show before. I think the human brain is not set up to do that in our current modern world. I think our brain is still stuck in trying to figure out if a saber-toothed tiger wants to kill us. So I don't think we can judge risk at all. So anything you put into your body can cause side effects. Literally look at any drug has side effects. Like even non-drugs, like putting salt on your food does something to your body. You could die because of that. You could die because you take an aspirin, just some fluke thing. You take some other drug, something, you might be sick, you might have something you don't know, take an aspirin, you die. Take a paracetamol, you die. Take anything, you die. It could happen. The risk is very, very, very small, but so I think it's the risk of getting anything serious from this vaccine. There is an issue that these vaccines, of course, are relatively new. Some of this, some of them, especially the mRNA kind of thing, but I think so many people have gotten them now, and they ran it through the same tests and everything that they test other vaccines. There's an argument to be had that maybe we should test vaccines in general a bit better, but I don't think, from everything I've seen, there's no real risk. Risk is negligible. The only thing we don't know is long-term effects, right? Because we don't know what this vaccine does to people in 40 years' time, and we will know that in 40 years' time. So there's always some risks. Everybody could die in 20 years who took this, right? Could happen. I think it's very unlikely. So I'm not going to worry about that. So I think it's fine to take it. My grandmother, for example, is 99. I think she should definitely take it. She has an appointment in April, I think. My parents, I think, should definitely take it. Because, the older you get, the higher is your chance to die if you develop COVID. So, right, just take the damn vaccine. It's probably going to work. It's not going to protect anybody else, but it's going to protect you. Now, there is a thing now where the AstraZeneca vaccine, and I put a link in the show notes, private citizen, not press, by the way. There's always lots of, if you're listening to this for the first time, I always try to make very copious show notes and give you all the material so you can look it up for yourself. Sadly, this is a German story, so it's in German, but I still want to include it for people who might speak German, or, translate it with DeepL or something. But, the AstraZeneca vaccine, that's the one that was developed by Oxford in the UK, which I actually thought, for my common sense evaluation, I thought would be safer. because it's not an mRNA thing. It's a well-tested method. It's basically the method they use to make influenza vaccines as well. So we have like decades of experience with that. So I thought, if anything, it's probably less likely to have any bad long-term effect. It's this one, but they have stopped giving that to people now. I think in Denmark and Sweden and in Germany, for some like really idiotic reason. So some people ask me about this as well. So in Germany, from what I can see from the sources on this story and some medical general medical publications I've looked this up in, we have 1.6 million people who've gotten this vaccine, and we have 7 suspected cases of a very rare like blood clotting issue where you get a thrombosis in your brain and you die, right? Which is always bad. But I mean, it's 7 suspected cases. Not quite sure that these are connected to actually getting the vaccine, but they're pretty sure in 1.6 million. That is like tiny, right? Any serious medication you get will have like those kind of side effects, right? Anything like hardcore you take because you actually have a have a disease. I'm not talking like headache. Has these kind of side effects. And the amazing thing is now they stopped giving this to people, which I think is very irresponsible because of this. Because I mean, what they have is correlation, right? They established that they gave the vaccine to somebody and then they developed that disease. That is not causation. They haven't proven that the vaccine causes this because they don't know. They don't know how. They don't even know how. They don't even have an idea of how. So yeah, and it's very, very small. I mean, I've talked about this before. 1,600 people die every day in Germany because a doctor in a hospital makes a mistake. 1,600. And that's the cases we know about. It's probably twice that number. It's probably, the other cases probably they just died. They never realized it was a fault of a doctor or a wrong drug or some nurse made a mistake, right? People die if you get an intravenous injection, right? You know how they, you see this in medical shows, you know how they hold the bottle of the thing they give you upside down and then put the needle from the bottom and then very carefully pull that in. They do that so that you don't have like air bubbles in the syringe. Because if they inject an air bubble in your vein, you might die. That air bubble might travel somewhere in your lung or something, cause a blood clot, you might die. Might go to your heart, get a heart attack, you're dead. That happens. That happens to people all over the world every day. People don't care, but people don't worry about that. They don't know about that, right? But now it's in the news that 7 people had something with this vaccine. They stopped. To me, it's irresponsible. I don't understand this. Our government, our idiotic health minister, Jens Spahn, the fucking idiot. I'm going to say it again. I think he should have been fired in February, not this February 2020, when in the beginning of the pandemic, he wanted to close hospitals. He's done many things since then. He's fucked up the distribution of the vaccine. He's fucked up everything. Now, they were so adamant to give it to people that they want to ban them from traveling. But on the other hand, 7 people develop something, they'll stop giving it to people. What the fuck is, decide, you fucking morons? This really drives me insane. It's this safety first society that we live in now. And the problem is that people want to go safety first, but they don't understand risks. So they're just paralyzed. Our government's paralyzed. They're give the vaccine to everybody, give it to nobody, give it to everybody, give it to nobody. We don't know what to do. They get paralyzed. At this rate, even if I want the vaccine, until they get through my age group, it'll be December 2022. Right? It's it's a joke. It's a joke. But yeah, so people ask me about that. That story, I think that was total overreaction. Again, people not understanding how risks work in this case. The government, I think they were just panicked because they're already, anti-vaxxers and vaccine skeptics are in the news. But they don't realize it just makes it even worse. Like, this just gives these people arguments that are just, I mean, the anti-vaxxer arguments, don't get me wrong, they're totally idiotic. They're so idiotic, I'm not even going to talk about them on the show. But yeah, a lot of people ask me about this, so I wanted to open with that. I want to give my opinion. It's my opinion for what it's worth. Please, as everything on this show, it's completely up to you to tell me what you think, and I will make that content on the show if you want to. If you want to just tell me it privately and don't want me to put it on the show, just tell me. Go to privatecitizen.press. That's the website. Contact link in the feedback section in the site header, and just let me know, because I'm very interested in that. I want to I want to know what all of us think about this.
Savvy.
Anyway, with that, let's get into IT security. Let's talk a little bit about cyber war. So, whenever there's a big hacker attack, vulnerability, owned systems, cyber war is mentioned these days. I personally find this term hilarious. I find any term with cyber hilarious because, I'm a child. I grew up at the ass end of the 80s, got my first computer in 89, and grew up in the 90s then with this computer, and then got the internet in 98. And to us, me growing up as a teenager, cyber was cyber sex. Right? One is cyber. That was like on the forums. That was like when we couldn't, back in the day, this is grandpa tells you a story from the war. Back in the day when I was a kid, the internet wouldn't even support, you couldn't have cyber sex. You didn't have a camera. You couldn't send somebody dick pics or anything. You could just text. Cyber was graphically describing what you were doing to the other. It's hilarious. So I always think cyber, anything with cyber is just a laugh. But it's a term now. Okay, so as everybody will know by now, I'm streaming this show live on Twitch while we record it. So we just had a great comment from Mode 7 in Twitch chat. I remember girls scanning their tits on a flatbed scanner to share online. Well, you were a lucky person when you grew up. I never saw that. Up to this day, I probably have to go to Pornhub now to look that up. I'll do that after the show. So I'm streaming my desktop live, so everybody can see how I produce this podcast. But it was slow, mind you. Yes, I can remember. I can remember the first porn image I saw was ASCII porn, right? And then you had so slow internet connection. You had the first pictures, and they were I think they were even GIFs at the not animated. They were just horribly pixelated, and they loaded line by line, and you could just basically watch it. Oh man! And then it was just some Playboy scan, right? It wasn't even hardcore pornography or anything. Oh my god, those were the days. Anyway, so that's why I think the term cyber is hilarious. But anyway, let's call it cyber war. Everybody calls it cyber war. Cyber attacks. Whenever something big happens, that's what people say. It was the Russians. The Russian hackers. So what does Wikipedia actually say? So they define, if you look for cyber, not for cyber, if you look for cyber war, Wikipedia forwards you to cyber warfare, and they define that as such. Cyber warfare is the use of digital attacks to attack a nation, causing comparable harm to actual warfare and or disrupting the vital computer systems. There is significant debate among experts regarding the definition of cyber warfare, and even if such a thing exists. One view is that the term cyber warfare is a misnomer, since no offensive cyber actions to date could be described as war. An alternative view is that cyber warfare is a suitable label for cyber attacks which cause physical damage to people and objects in the real world. Now, the question is that even a thing? Is this a term we should use? Because I don't think that happens much. Mode 7 says we had to work hard for our prawn back in the day. Yes, indeed, we did have. So is this a thing, right? Is cyber warfare actually a thing? Now, before I go into that, and before we talk, cyber IT security, let's quickly just have a very quick view in history what war is, right? War is usually defined as a combative actions between kind of the official militaries of two nations. It doesn't have to be two nations. It can be a civil war. It could be militaries or within a nation, or like competing, like maybe the military and maybe an uprising. But it gets gray. Like the French Revolution, was that a war? You don't really. That's usually a war is between nations or between competing people competing to govern or to own a a tract of land. Sometimes it's weird. Like sometimes they're not per se nations. For example, or when there's like weird situations. You have World War One, right, where there's the Russian Empire, and they have an army, and then the revolution breaks out, and then suddenly there's a Red Army, and that's fighting like the other armed forces, and then they retreat, like they extract themselves from the actual war they're in. Like they're corner cases. But generally back in the day, especially like in the Middle Ages, right, you had a declaration of war. You had a king, and he would write to another king, kind of Game of Thrones, and send a raven off and go, "Dear sir, I would like to inform you that I'm declaring war." Now that's an important thing because it's an international politics. Like the declaration of war is an important thing, but it's not that important anymore. Right? You can see with the beginning of World War One, I think generally that like the declaration of war, like the written declaration of war, wasn't that important anymore. You still had it kind of World War One, but by the time World War Two rolls around, it's just kind of like an afterthought, right? I mean, Germany had invaded Poland. I don't know. I can't remember when they actually declared war, but it was like, that already captured like half of the Polish territory, I think. So there it's more like the action that you're doing that's declaring, that's the war. Like that's the declaration of war. Kind of same thing. It gets even more complicated, and it gets more gray these days, right? When Russia invaded Crimea, ostensibly starting a war with Ukraine. I mean, to this day, the official Russian government position is that they have not invaded Crimea, right? That it's like Eastern Ukrainian like separatists fighting, maybe with like underhanded help from the Russian military, who knows, fighting the other military in Ukraine. When it's obvious that it was like instigated by Russia, there's ample proof now. It's relatively clear. You can see there's Russian arms being used. There's like Russian soldiers like without patches on their uniforms, basically, special opsing in. I mean, it's relatively clear. But I mean, that's not a declared war, right? Russia is not like de facto at war with Ukraine. I mean, not both sides don't agree on that, and there's like, this is kind of something that built itself out. I think came out of the Cold War, where since the Cold War, since you have nuclear powers, you can't declare war on a nuclear power. You can't declare like all-out war on Russia because they nuke you, right? War, per definition, generally would be the fighting with all means you have. Right? There's no, in international law, there's no like, oh, I'm declaring a conventional war. Right? I'm gonna declare war on you, provided that you only fight back with like tanks and planes and ships, but don't use your nuclear bombs and don't use your, I don't know, whatever, like chemical weapons. Or then you get into what's outlawed. That's important as well. Like it's, there's the Geneva Conventions. There's like conventions, what kind of stuff you can use, like what kind of weapons you can use. And then there's the question, like, do people actually, adhere to that or don't they? Why am I talking about this? Because the crux of cyber war is exactly that. if you accept that cyber war exists and, cyber warfare has been perpetrated in the past, then you do it to not declare a war, right? You want to hurt somebody, but because it's such a new arena and it's not accepted as an actual battlefield, even though, lots of militaries now have, I don't know, the US has like this US Cyber Command. Wait, oh, damn. Why don't I have I'm not prepared. As always. US Cyber Command. I think that's how they have to be called. Like, just like Space Force is Space Force. It's the US Cyber Command. And, the German military has whatever Ursula von der Leyen cooked up when that was still her job, like the cyberware or whatever the fuck it is. And they have, like, digital camouflage. I don't know. They probably just play Escape from Tarkov all day. So it's like an arena where you can, ostensibly it's an arena where you can attack a country without them being able to fight back. Or they can fight back in the air quotes cyber arena, but it's not a declaration of war, right? If you're a NATO member, there's the NATO, I don't even know what's called in English. In Germany, we call it der Bündnisfall, the alliance thing. The thing that triggers NATO, the NATO clauses, right? If somebody attacks a NATO country, then there's a contract and there's international law that says, or alliances and pacts that say that all other NATO countries need to defend that NATO country, right? But like a cyber attack doesn't trigger that. So, or it doesn't yet. I don't know. But that is why, in theory, you would. That's why a nation would commit cyber warfare. Also, it's cheap, right? You get a few hackers in some building somewhere, you supply them with pizza and Mountain Dew, and then you just go, right, just, do whatever you want. Rack places, steal data, fuck them, but don't get caught. And you do that. And then if you get caught, you're like, oh, we don't know who these people are. What building? That building. No. That was pizza delivered? No, we don't know anything about it. No, that's a school. That's a school, man. That's a school. So yeah, it's cheap. It's you can't get. So there are reasons why states do this. Now, do I believe that states do this? I think yes. I think it's a case of it's completely. How do I say this? It's believable that they would do that, right? Why wouldn't they do that? And so probably somebody's doing it, right? The point is, it's kind of really hard to, that's why you would do it as well. It's kind of really hard to get caught or to catch them or to prove that it was like somebody from a country. And we'll get into why that is, but generally it's because, let's say the German Bundestag gets attacked, and then there's malware, you look into the malware, it's like, oh, it's all Russian. And then you trace it back to the server and servers in Russia, right? Do you go, yeah, it's the Russians? Or do you go, maybe it was the Chinese, right, who wrote malware in Russian. They just got somebody who can write Russian, right? They wrote the malware in Russian and then infiltrated a server in Russia without the Russians knowing, and then started the attack from there, right? And then you go like, yeah, but it was like written in a time zone that's like Moscow time zone, and like they worked on Friday, like Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, and you're like, yeah, but couldn't the Chinese just get a crack team that just does night shifts, like switches their whole living schedule over to Moscow time? That's how I would do it. I don't work for intelligence service. I'm not like spectacularly intelligent, but like even I could come up with that idea. So it's like, that's what's called attribution, right? That's really, really hard. And I'll talk a little bit about that later, but so the general problem, I think this is happening, but it's like really hard to see. I think it's also overrated Because whenever you read about this, oh my God, they're gonna hack the nuclear power plants and those explode and then we're dead. Or like you see Hollywood movies and they hack all the traffic lights, right? And they all show green at the same time. Everybody runs into each other. Everybody's dead. All the roads are fucked. Everything explodes. That's not how it works, right? All the traffic lights are not all connected. Like even if they were, there'll probably be one accident somewhere, and then somebody goes, "Wait, all the traffic lights are showing green everywhere. Let's just not drive without looking. Maybe the traffic lights are broken." Right? Then there's a thing where nuclear power plants are not completely controlled by like a computer. Right? There's always like these computers are isolated. They're not on the internet. They have different networks. Like there's a hardware button you can press where you can turn it off. Yes, you can cause you can cause harm. You can certainly destroy equipment. I mean, there's one case. Actually, I didn't put this in the show notes, so this is why I'm playing for time here, because I'm looking for something to write this down so I can do the show notes. I mean, one famous example is, and I don't even know what it was called. Damn it! What's wrong with my brain today? The Iranian thing, Iranian nuclear centrifuges hacker attack. See, this is how journalist works. You just put that into Google, and then it tells you Stuxnet. Well, I know a lot about Stuxnet. I just couldn't remember. So Stuxnet is one of the examples where, like, I think, was it the Israelis? It's hard to tell who it was, the Israelis, the Americans. Somebody basically put malware in the plant in Iran where they were refining uranium, I think. Was it plutonium? I think it was uranium. Something radiological. There was like some Siemens centrifuges, and they were, of course, controlled over a computer. And basically, they made the centrifuges just spin a lot without actually the panel telling you that they would do. And then they just broke, right? They just fell apart. They just broke. So, they put back the Iranian nuclear program for, whatever amount of time. I mean, you can certainly do that, and it's been done in the past. But generally, it's not like it's not like the end of the world. I think it gets over exaggerated. Sorry, I was hitting my microphone with a pen there. Let's take a sip of grog while we're at it. And one of the problems is like that it's like really hard to see who did something, right? There's like all these different kinds of hacker attacks, cyber attacks you can do. You can do them for all kinds of different reasons, and there's like all these kind of different people doing them. So we have, for example, there's viruses, there's worms, Trojans, botnets, DDoS attacks, phishing, DNS attacks, scams, CO scams. I'll just put some down that I can remember. Ransomware, industrial espionage, attacks on critical infrastructure, supply chain attacks. And we'll be getting into, like, I'll be explaining some of them. I have some historic examples here. But, there's all this crap. And then there's all these different people who do it. Like, you start with script kiddies, right? Bored teenagers in their bedrooms. They read some stuff on the internet and then go, oh, let's create a virus. And they have caused havoc in the past, I can tell you. Like these bored, mostly men, right? Because young men are dumb because they're controlled by their penis and their hormones. And they think it's cool, so let's do this. And, they have wrecked shit in the past that if you just looked at, like, whatever they caused, you might think, hey, this was like a country fucking with us. Then there's professional hackers. There's people, they're professional, they get paid for what they do. There's organized crime, who pays professional hackers. And then there's, of course, state-sponsored hackers who are just like sometimes, it's military units maybe. Sometimes it's just, shady state agencies paying professional hackers. Sometimes paying script kiddies. There's intelligence services. It all gets blurry. It could be intelligence services paying script kiddies. Who knows? Maybe the script kiddies don't even know. Like it blurs all into each other. How are you gonna figure that out? And I think, and this is not something that the press discusses a lot, but I think this is a thing. I think there's political operators. I think you now have, if you have an election going on somewhere, you have different camps, and they're probably hacking each other, or they're hacking other people, and maybe news networks or whatever, right? Spreading misinformation. I don't know. They could be hiring script kiddies to just mess with the other party. You have stuff like the Hillary Clinton email leaks. Like, was that the Russians? Was that the opposition? Right? It gets like really, really hard. So let's go through a little bit of a history, since I'm old man here, and talk a little bit about what historically how it developed. So if you're a bit younger, you don't remember the early days. Let me tell you, I used a computer in '89, and I remember the early days. Right, this was like 10 years before I got the internet. We still had viruses, right? You'd be in school and you'd swap like this, floppy disk, like these things, the safe icon, right? That thing. That was like a thing. And at first they were really big and they were wobbly. That's why they're called floppy disks. I was making a little bit funny, but yeah. So we were exchanging those because basically we didn't want to pay for video games like you don't today, and you could just a friend gave you like a game, and we were spreading viruses that way. So I remember the first like boot sector viruses. I got one really early on. Like when I barely understood what the computer was and how boot sector worked, I had to learn all that shit. There was no internet. You had to kind of figure out, buy books and read shit and wreck your computer trying to figure out how it all worked. And, I never got the Michelangelo virus, but that's a famous example. So I put a link in the show notes. That's like one of the earliest ones. And these boot sector viruses was just some idiot writing it because writing viruses was really new. And basically what they did is they like overrode your boot. They didn't even mostly interact with the operating system. They just like fucked up your boot sector and you couldn't boot your PC anymore. Like if they were really, really, really good, they like the guys writing them, they could like write a message. Right? You try to boot up your computer and it would say, haha, you're fucked. Right? Like this was at the time when basically you couldn't do ASCII art. Because it had to like put it in the BIOS. It was like a BIOS message or whatever. So that was like the first virus. And that was a classical virus basically hiding as a file, and you copied it, right? And then you executed, like you might get a floppy disk with the game. There was an exe file on there, right? And you execute that because you thought you were starting the game, but in reality you were starting this virus and was fucking up your boot sector. And then, it developed. We're still at the time where, people are writing viruses for fun. There was things like Michelangelo itself, like that virus actually didn't even fuck your computer. It just fucked your computer on one specific day, like every year, which was like Michelangelo's birthday. And of course, then later on you had other viruses and then, we're getting into like worms and like email viruses. And so I Love You is a very famous example. This is like from the 90s. This is actually the spread via email, but then was worm. A virus means basically a virus is something you have to copy yourself. A worm is something that you execute, and this is mostly more. So pretty much any virus these days is a worm, I guess. They're more advanced, and they will replicate themselves. Right, and this would like kind of you'd get it in an email, you'd execute it by mistake, and then it would send itself off via email, or it would copy itself, on a floppy disk that was in your floppy drive, whatever. So that's when you get worms, right? And they basically spread themselves. I remember a really bad worm, and this is like we're talking 2006 maybe. I was working for Net Cologne as a support technician in schools, and we got the configger. And configger is like it's like English, the word config file, and ficker in German means fucker. So it's the config fucker. And this was a botnet basically, but a botnet is just you have viruses, you have worms that spread themselves, you have Trojans, which are usually like very lean viruses that you download, you execute, and then they're called Trojans because you think there's something else, right? They might hide as, like, back in the day, it was like screensavers, free screensaver, you execute it, get no free screensaver, nothing happens. But in the back, what you don't know is that the virus just executed and is basically now on your computer and then downloads something, a payload. That's usually, what Trojans do. And you would get into these botnets where basically these Trojans would download a software that would turn your computer into a slave. Like, you'd think your computer is okay, but it basically belongs to somebody else on the internet now. Right, and then it would announce itself typically on an IC channel back in the day and go, hey, there was like a really obscure IC channel somewhere with some guy watching it. And it, all these bots would come in, these owned computers would sign up. They would like, somebody just executed me and now I'm at your command master. And then people would collect them, right? They would collect thousands, hundreds of thousands of these machines, usually to do DDoS attacks, right? To direct all of these machines' traffic without their user knowing to a website and then kick it off the net, which you can use for blackmail. You can go to like Amazon before a big Black Friday and say, right, you pay us $10 million or your website will be down all day tomorrow. And that's how all this stuff started. Mode 7 says there's a blast from the past as well. I was playing Quake 3 when I was hit with Blaster. I thought my motherboard was dying or something. I know the name. What specifically did Blaster do? Did it just play sounds on your Sound Blaster? Configure was really bad because we got it in schools. It was really good at spreading itself. It used like a ton of security vulnerabilities in Windows to spread itself on the network actively. Oh, it rebooted the machine sporadically. Yeah, these kinds. They were like, that was really nasty. It was even worse than just deleting your boot sector, right? You could fix that, or you would like, okay, I reinstall my system's fucked. If it just reboots sporadically, you're like, what the fuck, man? I'm not sure what else it did, but everyone in the land started to experience it. Yeah, so this was the thing with Configure, right? So we imagine like a school network, right? Imagine I'm in a school. There's like 800 computers in the whole school, right? And you're like, okay, you go in there, you do like networks, you plug like your Linux notebook into the network, so it can't get infected because it's Linux and this thing is looking for Windows machines. And then you do like this configure try to actively find other machines on the LAN. So you could pinpoint. You like install some rules, and you could, I don't know what they used back in the day, Wireshark or Nmap or something. And you could kind of figure out which machines were infected, right? And then I'd have to look up, okay, this is all the machine names that are infected, right? And then I had to go to the guy on the okay, I'm gonna Mode 7 just sent me a link to Blaster. I'm gonna put that in the show notes so everybody can experience that. So then you go to the like facility management and ask, okay, I got a list of all these machines, and you have to figure out in which rooms they are. You have to get access to them. They might get passwords because they are like teacher machines, whatever. And you spend all day basically you'd reinstall everything, right? Because you like these machines you can't trust. You have images, but you have to reinstall them. And then you did that for a day or two. Like you shut all the computers off so the thing couldn't spread itself, and then you fixed like every computer one after the other that was infected. And then a week later, or like 2 days later, you get a call from the school. It's like, what the hell did you do? The virus is back. And it's just like some machine that wasn't in school at the time or wasn't on or whatever still had it. Or like some teacher or some mostly teachers, students weren't weren't allowed to use USB stick or whatever. But somebody took a file home, got it on the stick, and just reinfected the network. The thing would spread. Like it was like whack-a-mole. There were schools where like I was like for months. I was getting so sick of it. By the end I would just listen to podcasts and just do it because it was just so automatic. And oh god, I couldn't configure was really that was a bastard of a virus or a worm. Now, interestingly, a few years later, I wrote a story for Heise. This is actually a case where a nuclear power plant got infected. So there was a nuclear power plant in Germany called Gundremmingen. I think it's off the grid now. That got infected with like viruses. I think one of it was Configure, basically somebody in this, in the office, like in the front office of something, opened the email. Classic story. Didn't get caught by antivirus. Spread in the network. This actually wasn't the control network. So this was this was like the office network, which wasn't connected to the control network. And it's a typical example of a story where everybody goes, "Oh my God, a virus in a nuclear power plant. We're all gonna die," and it wasn't scary at all. Right? It was just like infecting office. Even if it had gotten on the fucking control computer, whatever it was that controls whatever, like, industrial control SCADA system that controls some part of the reactor. This was a fucking virus that tried to put computers into a botnet to mine like Bitcoin or do DDoS attacks, right? It wasn't, and this was back in the day, I think, when you could still mine Bitcoin on normal machines. That was a long time ago. But it wouldn't have done anything. Like, there was nobody looking to own a nuclear power plant. It just happened. That's just like that's just one of the examples where I think, where it's like overhyped, right? They could have said, "Oh my God, we're gonna die. It's a Russian hacker attack." Right, and it might have even come from a server in Russia. I don't know, but it's just de facto not a bad thing. And I mean, just a normal thing. It's just like any other office, any other company getting infected. I'm not saying somebody could tailor a virus, kind of like Stuxnet that goes into a nuclear power plant and then fucks it up. I'm just saying, if that causes the nuclear power plant to explode, it's not because cyber was bad, but it's because the nuclear power plant is designed badly. And, we've thought about these things a long time now, that I hope they are defending against this kind of shit and they fix this kind of shit. And so these things develop further and further. We're getting into botnets. So a good example there is Mirai, which was actually an IoT botnet. Which was originally developed by some script kiddies because they were having this is a hilarious story. There were like all these competing Minecraft hosting companies before Mojang. I mean, they still are, but like before Mojang did their own service, everyone was like, "Oh my God, use this company," and apparently somebody was running a Minecraft hosting company, just some kid in his bedroom, like some teenager or whatever. And there was he wanted to take down a competitor, which he didn't like. So he wrote himself a botnet, right? He wrote himself a Trojan, a virus that would put computers into a botnet, which he could then use to fuck with this other Minecraft hosting company. Now, at some point, he was done with whatever, and he probably sold the source code to some people. But at some point, he went I'm going open source. I'm using that in air quotes. He basically put the Mirai source code into the public domain. And that's when other people took it and developed it further and wrote in one case was this IoT botnet, which basically specifically looks for IoT devices, i.e., not like computers, like your desktop computer that you turn off at night, but like your home router, right? Or that thing that powers whatever you use to change the color of your light bulbs or your Philips Hue or whatever, your internet connected washing machine, right? A system that's always on the internet. It's never turned off, which is great if you want a DDoS attack, because for DDoS attacks you don't need a lot of power in the individual machines. You just need a lot of individual machines. You need to control them, and they need to be on the internet at all times, preferably with an internet address that doesn't change. So IoT stuff is perfect for that. And this rose to fame when this guy wanted to attack. Some guy wrote, it was open sourced in air quotes. put in public domain. There are lots of versions. Somebody used a version and he wrote himself or rented. I don't know what the fuck. People rent these things. This organized crime comes in. Some people write it. Other people rent it. Rent it off to people. They pay for it. They rent it to do DDoS attacks. To extort money, whatever. It's like an economy thing. It's like its own underground economy. But, somebody used a Mirai version because they wanted to take down, for whatever reason, some ISP in the UK. Completely backfired, and what they basically did is, because of some configuration error, infected a lot of home routers of Deutsche Telekom. And this was a worm, so it would infect like one of these routers and then spread to the next one. So all these telecom routers were vulnerable for a certain security vulnerability. And it just spread from router to router, and it literally took down a good part of the German internet one day. I was at work at Heise. It was panic. It was pandemonium. It was hilarious. And yeah, so that was Mirai. And then we get to ransomware. That was the hot shit for a while. People realized that DDoS attacks and extorting money, or actually like the classic cybercrime thing, cybercrime, where you basically install a virus on somebody's computer, and then you watch what happens, and you like do a keylogger or whatever, and you wait for them to log into their banking, you get all the passwords, then when they're sleeping, you do it, and you see all their money, right? That's a lot of work, and it doesn't work in many cases. And so they figured out, hey, it's very easy if we just automate a thing where, like, if we spread our malware, however, like via email, as a worm on the internet, it's in downloads over corrupted banner, whatever. Have a Trojan download this thing, and then we use a thing like a boot sector virus, but instead of fucking their system, we put a message on screen that says you can't use your system unless you pay us a ransom. And that, of course, got, like, Bitcoin is one of the things that made that possible, because that was a way of relatively anonymously getting people to pay you money. So that was the hot thing for a while. And, this was literally, at first, I think, just professional hackers doing it. Then actually organized crime gangs doing it, because there was a lot of money in it. Then they extorted specifically hospitals or specifically government institutions. And it worked. Like, for a while, the FBI was saying, just pay it. Just pay it. Because they were using, like, this cryptography where, right, if they coded it right, they could have, they could actually free your computer. Like, they could, you would send them money, and they would send you code, and then you would put that in at your boot screen, and you would be okay. Of course, if you had backups, you wouldn't have done any of that. You just reinstall your computer, put the backup, put an image on, whatever, you're good to go. But most people don't have backups, or don't have recent backups, or don't have working backups. So, there were government institutions who were paying this. There were hospitals who were paying this, schools, people, like private citizens. The FBI at one point was saying, just pay it. It's just easy. And then some of the gangs actually never unlocked your PC, but the successful ones did. And there were some that actually had, like, fucking hotlines that were better than your ISP hotline, where they would actually help you unlock your PC and buy Bitcoins and whatever. So of course, there's all these other scams where they put a virus on your computer that does something. Then they figure out what your telephone number is, or they get you to call a number, and then you have tech support from Microsoft or an antivirus company, supposedly, and then they help you. Or even, like, they just ring you and, like, oh, please, this is Microsoft support, please go to the website and do this. People do that, and they actually download the virus themselves. And then, whatever. It's like all this, sorry, I'm whacking my microphone again. Like, it's all these different things. And now the interesting thing is, we now get to, like, suspected cyber warfare, or let's say attacks by state-sponsored actors that were made to look like they were ransomware attacks. I mean, there's the Sony Pictures hack. which is thought to be North Korea fucking with Sony Pictures for some movie about North Korea they did, which North Korea didn't like, which looked like a ransomware attack but wasn't. I mean, if you have a ransomware virus and it basically functions like a boot sector virus, it completely deletes every data on the computer instead of being recoverable, then you can't tell that really from. It could just be a badly written ransomware virus, right? Same thing. There was a not Petya. There was a ransomware called Petya, and then there was a version called not Petya, which looked like a ransomware, but wasn't. It was like you could actually tell from the code they were never really trying to, extort Bitcoin. Basically, they were trying to fuck with companies. It's thought to be the some Russian military intelligence just trying to fuck with, the European economy. And, there's a large-scale ransomware attacks which had the same, like actual ransomware, I think, which WannaCry, that's also disputed, but, you don't know. It could also be a ransomware attack that just went out of hand and affected everything. And then, you basically can't tell this apart. Actually, the funny thing about NotPetya is I did some research again today and I came across the English Wikipedia, which actually lists a reference as a Heise story of mine, because I was, back in the day, they were going on like, so basically there was ransomware called Petya, right, by a guy who I think really liked the GoldenEye movies. And I personally love the GoldenEye movies, huge fan of Brosnan's Bond, GoldenEye, one of my favorite movies. And they named their ransomware. This was like a guy who had a Twitter account, ostensibly, you can never really tell, but it looked like it, he had like the evil hacker from GoldenEye as like his avatar, and he named his ransomware after the satellites they use, like these nuclear bomb satellites that caused the EMP attack, right? There's Misha and Petya. And that GoldenEye movie, I Am Invincible! That movie, exactly, Mode 7. Love that movie. That's this very stereotypical Russian hacker in the movie. And he had him as an avatar, which I think is just good class. Anyway, so I kind of came up with the idea that that's why they were called Petya. And at first, the second attack, which, was actually a supply chain attack, which is interesting, which is thought to be a state-sponsored attack, they actually copied like his original Petya. And then he went on Twitter and said, "This is not my malware." Right? I actually just, I'm a good guy, in air quotes. I just extort people. And I actually give them back their data if they pay me. This doesn't decrypt anything. It's not me. Somebody is stealing my name. Right? So they were actually stealing a professional criminal's malware, probably, to have a state-sponsored attack that looked like it was that criminal. And that's why I think Kaspersky originally named it not Petya, because it's not Petya. But yeah, interesting story. Now, the interesting thing about not Petya is that it was one of the first, these large-scale supply chain attacks, because what happened here was there was an Ukrainian company that made text software. That was called MeDoc, which basically, if you're in Ukraine, they have, like Germany has that as well. They have text software, but in Ukraine you mandated to use that. You have to use that. I think in Germany they're starting with that as well. But but it's not only Ukraine. It's also all the companies that do business in Ukraine need this to file their taxes, and these hackers managed to own the server that sends out the software updates for the software. So they owned that server, they made a malicious software update, right? And a software update is just an executable in most cases that gets pushed to all the computers, gets executed automatically, mostly with system privileges, and then, installs the new software. But in this case, it's installed malware, which then fucked all the machines and pretended to be ransomware, which wasn't. It just completely scrambled all the data on all the machines. Caused huge problems. Maersk, the international shipping conglomerate, actually the company that ships 20% of all goods that are shipped worldwide are shipped by Maersk. And they got so fucked that they had to work literally with pen and paper for 2 weeks. Because pretty much all their computers got fucked. It's hilarious. There was I think at Davos, their CEO of Moller-Maersk, gave a talk about this, which is hilarious. Where he tells like how he got woken up in the night. It's like, we're fucked. All the computers aren't working. What are we gonna do? So supply chain attack, pretty fun thing. Something we'll be talking about if I talk about this SolarWinds thing in an upcoming episode. But generally, this was even worse because not only was it executed with system privileges, but they had the software had some really weird network, like really high level Windows network privileges to it would kind of get the software update on one client and then distributed through the network, but it had some privileges, like very high privileges that it actually didn't need for that. But I think this caused it could take over like the domain controller or something. So it could basically you got it like on one machine in the network and it would completely fuck your whole network, even if this Medoc software wasn't installed on there. So that's fun. And that's something you can do as a state. Like you can do that. You can fuck somebody's. That wouldn't make sense. You can completely destroy. This cost billions of euros of damage on the European economy. Right? Companies literally went I think Maersk put 4 billion euros aside to fix all of this. They had to reinstall all of their computers. All this. They had literally. It's like you think the computers aren't working well, but if you're a shipping conglomerate, Maersk are the guys with these huge ships. If you ever been in a harbor, I lived in Hamburg, went to Hamburg harbor often. These ships it's all these containers on there. They're wide, they're fucking high. You're there's a fucking skyscraper in the water. And they just go into a harbor. It's very expensive to get them into the harbor. The slot where they're being loaded with stuff or unloaded, it's very expensive. So they set in their slots in the harbor that cost hundreds of thousands of euros a day, just to sit there, and they couldn't unload the ship. They're okay, that's 500,000 euros. That's another 500,000 euros. That's another 500,000. We can't do anything. We don't know where to put these containers, what to do with them. It's all in our computers. So you can cause trouble with this, right? You can't really make generally houses explode or whatever, or at least we haven't, wouldn't know how that works. I haven't seen it. I'm not saying it's not possible, especially now when you're putting that. That's the thing. People are completely over exaggerating this kind of crap, and they're oh my god, we're gonna die cyber attacks, and then on some publication, and the next article is oh, put all this smart home software in your house. You're at the point where we're doing that, where our gas is controlled by this shit and is connected to the internet by some shady Chinese router that who the hell knows who did the software for that, and if it's secure. At that point, yes, then I think we're not at a point where you can cause serious damage with other than monetary damage, bodily harm with this stuff. But I'm thinking we're getting there. We're building a world, and maybe that's another episode I could do at some point. We're building a world in the future where this is possible. I talked about securities in cars a little bit. That's another point. Self-driving cars, self-driving trains. At some point we'll have safe, self-flying airplanes. That is when this kind of shit is gonna get really interesting. And then, we had some actual attacks that look like they were state-sponsored. And, I don't know if they're cyber war. We had, for example, there was an attack on the German parliament in 2015, which is also thought to be the Russians. Often this is to exfiltrate data. This is there's also the thing where it's it's not really warfare, right? It's espionage. It's like industrial espionage, or it's like state level espionage, which often isn't like, that's what James Bond is all about, right? James Bond's job, like these people's jobs, is to do shady shit without causing wars. That's deniable. That you can just put on other things. When you get caught, you're like, oh, this was a rogue agent or whatever. I think that is what these kind of cyber attacks are most often used for when they're used by states. It's just an extension of espionage, right? It's not cyber war. We can talk about Snowden and the stuff he taught us about what the NSA and other agencies are doing, and probably all our intelligence services, wherever you listen to this, all doing. But that's not warfare, right? That's just it's espionage, right? It's not something that will cause a war when you get caught, and it's not out in the open. Mode 7 is just, this is something I didn't put in, but not because it's not fun, because just of time. Mode 7 is talking about these IoT vulnerabilities, and like there's these sex toys, which I personally don't, it's not my kink, so I don't understand how somebody would do this, but you put your penis in like this cage, right? That's a thing people do. And then there's internet connected cages where like your partner, who might be, you might have a distance relationship, so far, I understand this, and you might be having cyber, right, over the internet, and your partner puts their cock in a cage, and then they can release it whenever they want. But you can hack it, and then you can somebody can hack it, and then ransom your cock. They're like, I'm a Russian hacker. I'm in your sex toy, and I will only release your cock if you pay me Bitcoin. Right? You can do that. I wrote a lot of stories at Heise because all my colleagues in the IT security department, I think, were too posh to write these, and I found them hilarious. There are lots of stories of sex toys with security vulnerabilities. There was one I researched where basically it was a dildo with a camera at the end. I don't know why you would do that, but so it was like for people who have long distance relationships, and to say this in modern parlance, the person with the vagina, or like we said it back in the day, the woman would fuck themselves with the dildo, and then the man or the other person with whatever primary sexual organs can watch inside, because the cameras, I don't know. Anyway, you could find them on the internet. You could basically go war driving through a city and find them and connect to Wi-Fi. But then somebody made a handy map so you knew where they were. So you could just go into your car and, I did some research on this. And yes, you could just, I was in Hanover at the time, and I found several of these devices. And luckily, all the ones I might or might not have contacted for research purposes, can't really go into the details. Luckily, they were just lying on the floor. But yeah, that is shit that is happening out there. While we were at cyber attacks, there was another, state sponsors attacks. There was another one in December 2015 over Christmas, which basically took down a part of the Ukrainian power grid. And, this was in the wake of the Crimea incident, so it's also thought to be like Russian military intelligence or whatever, just causing a little bit of havoc on the side, which is understandable. That is believable, I think. It's just hard to prove. As I said before, the problem here is attribution. And attribution isn't, as I explained, you can fake everything. Like, it's a computer, right? It's data. You can fake it. You can write, I can write a virus. I can, get somebody who's Russian and make the code comments Russian, right? I can change my computer clock to a different time. I can actually write it at a different time. I can own servers on the other side of the world and attack from there. It's always hard. It's all like, it's never proof. It's always made out like in the news, like, oh, we know it was the Russians. Or alongside some security company says it was the Russians. And if you actually read into all this documentation they always have, it's just all circumstantial evidence, right? It's often believable, but you'd go like, it's conceivable, or it's even likely that this was coming from where he said it was, but it's far from proof, right? If you put that into court, right? If we're doing like, if you did if you had evidence like this for a murder charge, like the judge, the guy would get off, because the judge would go, this circumstantial evidence. It looks like he did it, but you can't really prove it. And this kind of thing. So with this German attack on the German parliament, I wrote a story back in the day, like one of the first stories about this. I was actually on TV. I was on mainstream primetime TV. And they asked me about this, and and then they said, the German government, the German foreign minister, the German internal minister has said this was attacked from the Russians. And I said, oh yeah, he says that. Okay, interesting. And this is just like, why are you saying this? And I'm like, well, because we don't have any proof, and I haven't seen any proof, right? I literally did ask the government, can you tell me why you're saying this? And they got nothing back to me. And so I was extremely skeptical. I basically said, I think the interior minister of the Federal Republic of Germany is full of shit. I said that very clearly. I think, like, I didn't say he's full of shit, but I was very clear. And the news lady was kind of shocked. But I thought that back in the day. I still think that. And the government has held on to that, and I learned, like, I was asking them, like, for years, like every month or something, like on the anniversary, whatever, of that original story, I would like write to them, can you give me information? I mean, nobody ever gave me information, not even off the record. And years later, I learned off the record from somebody who at the time, reliable source, I would say, who told me that. And later, I think it came out. It was a story, like somebody, I think, Spiegel or FAZ or Süddeutsche, somebody, it came out basically. Basically, what happened is the German government knew it was the Russians from a spy. They actually, interestingly, in an early press release, they had said it was ordered by Vladimir Putin. And I was like, they're full of shit. Like, I wrote that in the story. I'm like, I didn't say they're full of shit, but I'm like, how would they like fucking know from any, like, first it's like 2 days ago. How do they have any forensic evidence at all that that is that advanced? And how would they know it? Like, Putin ordered it, and it's just they didn't know from the forensic evidence. They had a spy. Close to Putin's circle, who they knew from that spy that Putin had ordered it. But of course they couldn't say that because they couldn't endanger the spy, right? That's the James Bond story. But so since then I've actually learned that it's often so it can be two things. Or it can be three things. Either they have forensic evidence, which, like, days after such an attack is extremely unlikely. I mean, to figure all this out needs months. You need to collect the data. You need to analyze it, right? You need to make sure that you did it right. It's like doing science, right? It is basically science. It takes ages. So generally, that's pretty unlikely that they know, especially if it's close to the event. It could be a political ploy, which I always default on. Right, which is like, okay, we have a beef with the Russians. Somebody hacked us. We just say it's the Russians. It's good propaganda. Or it could be a source like this. It could be an intelligence source, which they can't tell you about, but they know through a different avenue what has happened, and they can't talk about that. Which I find interesting. Now, just very quickly, at the end of this whole segment, I want to quickly talk about, I mean, you have malware. Usually it uses malware primarily uses people's stupidity, right? And by that, I don't mean that in a derogatory way. Everybody's stupid. There's a book my wife recommended to me once by a German writer, which is called Sekundenscharf, and it's a pun. If you're German, you might appreciate this. In Germany, we have a term Sekundenschlaf. It's like in a car when you just nod off for a second, right? That's a Sekundenschlaf, literally sleep of a second. And Schlaf means to sleep. Schaf means sheep. So it's not the second sleep, it's the second sheep. And he explains a phenomenon where if you can, and in your personal life, you think about it, you will recognize this. If you catch a person on the wrong foot, sometimes they'll do dumb shit. Like if they're not prepared, like if you don't have time to think about it, like you're a sheep for a second, right? You're really dumb. And in this book, he just explains like lots of situations where this kind of thing happened to him, which is hilarious. But everybody's like this, right? Catch somebody in the wrong situation, you're in stress, you're looking for that one email, you get an email, you think it's your boss, you're late with this anyway, you have this other problem, you just instinctively do what they say. Like usually you check links, you check, you never execute stuff you get in email, you know all that. You've got antivirus, you know everything, but that second you're like, oh my god, I'm stressed. Or it might be a thing like this, there's this by now well-known scam going around, where basically somebody says, oh, I hacked your computer and I've caught you masturbating and I'm going to put it on the internet unless you pay me. And people are just afraid. They're like, we're all men, right? If we get down to it, we're all masturbating. We all do this. And we all have webcams on our computers. I always unplug my webcams when I'm masturbating, but you could forget it. Like you could be scared. I personally am not scared. Like you can't actually extort me with this. I'm like, okay, put it on the internet. Everybody masturbates. They're like, we know what you masturbated to. I'm like, okay, yeah, probably stepsister got stuck in a door, because that's what every porn movie seems to be in the last 2 years. So put it out there. But, people are scared. Like there are lots of these scams with COVID that work because people are really scared of COVID. So you can do these things and you can catch people out and you can basically break them at that moment, and then they do something really dumb. And you can do it with everybody. That's how CEO scams work, right? They might be already in an email account in the company. And they've looked at stuff for months. They know who everybody is, and they know who the CEO is, and they know how all the people are, and they know who can get what kind of money, right? Who has access to what kind of money. They know all this shit. And then they see, the CEO is going to Asia for a business deal, right? And then they can do the thing where like they send an email from the CEO's email account, because they hacked that as well, because they're in the network, to like the second guy in charge, and they go, look, the deal we're talking about, like shit has hit the fan. I need you to wire 5 million euros to this account by tomorrow, or we can't buy this company. And that works. That works, especially like if there's a power, if the second guy in charge is really used to getting these kind of like snap decisions from a CEO or whatever, that is not even unlikely, right? That is, you can't really you can't really fault the guy for that even. Pretty much. I mean, it's just you caught him on the wrong foot. You knew exactly what these kind of things work. So that's usually what malware depends on. There's, of course, also security vulnerabilities. There are lots of systems with known security vulnerabilities. They're not patched because everybody has shit to do. Sometimes there's new systems, right? There's like when the pandemic hit, all these companies suddenly had to do home office, working from home, and they had to set up all these systems. They weren't used to it. Some of them, get installed. People don't know what they're doing. Default configuration is unsecure, shit like that. you have you have vulnerabilities and people will exploit them. Also, and this is one specifically I just want to mention at the end because it comes up a lot. There's 0 days. And if you don't know what a 0 day is, a 0 day just means it's a security vulnerability that at the moment, on the day where the shit hits the fan and all the systems are locked and everybody's fucked, that security vulnerability is not public. It is known because somebody knew it and exploited it, but it wasn't publicly known. So let's say it's a security vulnerability in Windows, a 0 day in Windows, very dangerous because Microsoft doesn't know about it, right? So they can't patch it. And so they are already behind. By the day this thing hits and everybody's fucked, they have to scramble to figure out what it is, write a patch, test that patch, deploy the patch, and then people are starting to be safe. But this is like days off, and people are already owned. That's why 0 days are so important. And that's why they always get mentioned, because, they're worth millions. Like a 0 day in Windows or in antivirus software or in comparable software is worth millions, right? In something like Medoc, maybe, right? If you discover that, you can, in underground shady places, sell that to somebody, because intelligence services or companies that work with intelligence services buy that shit, and they need that. So there's always this debate with the NSA, which, presumably buys 0 days to own people, like other countries, or just to keep them, in their arsenal to use later. Like, isn't that dangerous? Shouldn't they actually fix that to protect? Because one of the missions of the NSA is attack, but the other mission is to protect the American public. Like, shouldn't they tell Microsoft or whoever so they can protect the general public? And so that is why 0 days in general are so important. And, just a fun thing, put a link in the show notes to the excellent Nerdcore, which is rap, song, 0 Day by MC Frontalot, which is amazing. And you should listen to that. It's very intelligent. He actually explains very well about the 0 days in that song. And it's also fun, and it's a good song. So that's about it. So basically what I want to say is, so I don't think cyber was war. I think cyber was specifically not war. I think the only reason you do that is so that you don't cause war. So it's not an act of war, right? There will be no war declared because you did that. It could be an act of war in the future, right? But right, so presumably at some point we have automated tanks or whatever. If you then do a cyber attack, that would probably be an act of war. Then that would be warfare. Then you can call it cyber war. Right now, it's just like a shady thing. To me, it's in the same realm as what intelligence services do. It's exactly that kind of. It has that going for it. It's a thing where you can do it and you can deny responsibility. You have plausible deniability in most cases. People won't be able to easily figure out who did it. Even if they do, they can't prove it. So it's, for me, it's that. I think cyber war actually hides the fact that this is by and large, I think a lot of the things that get called cyber wars are just cyber attacks, probably by criminals or like things that went wrong. But like the things that are actually by state actors, that's espionage, and I think it's purposely actually being called cyber war, because I think the intelligence services want to kind of hide that that's what they do, and if they put it in the realm of the military, then people think about the military and don't think about intelligence services, and it's just like intelligence services. The only reason they exist. It can be argued, and I don't want to do this because this is not really an ethics podcast, but you can argue if intelligence services should exist, like in a rule of law, in a democracy, right? Should Germany have an intelligence services? You could argue, do they fulfill important roles? Are they needed? Could actually more transparent organizations do this kind of thing? But I think, and this is probably because I studied politics. I remember I used to have an argument with my dad about this at one point, a very heated argument. I personally think the only reason intelligence services exist, and this is, that's why they're founded, this is a historical fact, I think, is to do things that are illegal or borderline illegal, or are things that should not be known. That's why it's all secret, right? They do, in many cases, do things that contravene the laws of the land. So I believe that German intelligence services do things that are against the German constitution. I do believe that U.S. intelligence services do things to U.S. citizens that contravene the Constitution of the United States. That's why they are there, right? If they wouldn't do that, then this could just be done by a normal military arm, right? But you wanna do shady shit. You want to do shit where you're not getting caught, or it can't be pinned back on you. And if you can do that, you can break laws, right? You tell yourself, like, the justification is for the good of the people, and then you do that. And that's kind of, I can draw a little bit of a circle to the first subject with the vaccinations here. I generally object to that. I'm not a utilitarian person. I'm not I don't think on a level of the state there should ever be an argument like if we can save people, this is justified. I think a functioning democracy, to me, in a rule of law, in a Rechtsstaat, as we call it in German, is defined by the fact that we have established certain ethical and moral guidelines that we will not cross, no matter what happens. And to me, a democracy, specifically a functioning democracy that can defend itself from its enemies, we call that wehrhafte Demokratie in Germany, right? To contradict our current democracy from the Weimar Republic, which got taken over by the Nazis because it couldn't defend itself against enemies of the Constitution. That is characterized by, a democracy usually is a people, the majority of the people deciding, not directly, but deciding with a elaborate system of what to do, right? The majority rules. And I think a democracy is only a functioning democracy, a modern democracy, democracy that can defend itself against its enemies, and stay a democracy, only works if there are borders, like if there are rules, and if there's a framework that can't be changed. Like if you establish rules and say, we decided that as a society we think this is morally paramount and we will not change this, then that can't be changed, even if the majority of the people at some point think that's a good idea, right? Because that is what happened with Nazi Germany. That is the thing we learned. The Nazis got to power in a democracy, legally. Yes, they used repression and terror and stuff like that, but at the end of the day, they had the support by the majority of the people. And I just believe that there should be some lines that can't be crossed, even if the majority of the people wants it. Even if the majority of the people says, if we can save thousands of people, we'll force people to put this stuff into their blood. I think that's a line we shouldn't cross, right? And I think we shouldn't have intelligence services. If we make laws and say our society functions in this way, and we won't do these things to other people because we think it's not right, it's not just, then we should not have clandestine agents of the government that break these laws. Doesn't matter how much life they say. It does not matter at all. This is like an ethical thing, right? This is like a fucking ancient Greece, Plato kind of shit, right? Where you go like, doesn't matter. The rules are there for a reason. And, it doesn't work if all society like adheres by these rules, and then the government creates like an agency with like 80 people, 800 people, 8,000 people that don't have to abide by those rules. That is not a just society, right? That's the problem I have with the Soviet Union. This is why the Soviet Union was not a just state, right? If you go it's better for all of society if we build socialism, right, in the union, but that means like certain people will have to suffer, then this is not a line you can't cross, right? Also, it's not right if the government says you have to abide by those rules, but then we create all these special departments and all these intelligence stuff and all these people who don't like, and the top of the party, the Politburo, they don't have to abide by these rules anyway, right? That's not a just state, and I just don't think we should do that. It goes for both topics. But that's pretty much all I want to say. I hope you enjoyed this. I hope this gave you some insight. And please, if it did, if it didn't, if you have any input, kind of like Mode 7 had live on the show, please get in contact and, send me some feedback. And speaking of feedback, let's talk about the feedback. So we had two producers who wrote in by the various means. Go to privatecitizen.press to give me some input. First was Funky Duck, who had an interesting idea for a future topic. Funky Duck says, have you done an episode on email? Sorry if I asked this already. No, you didn't, and you don't have to be sorry even if you did. Specifically involving things like pixel and link tracking, but also the general security and stability stuff, if that's not too much scope creep. I don't think that's too much scope creep. I think that's a great idea. And, we'll be talking about solar wind in the future. And then I'm going to talk about the exchange hacks at some point. And, that leads us naturally to email. So I'll try to get this in as soon as possible. And if I don't remember, I'm writing all this down, but if I don't remember, please, hit me up again. Tell me, you're fab. A month ago, 2 months ago, you said you were going to do this. When are you going to do this topic? Please let me know. I appreciate this very much. I want people to tell me what they want to hear about. And then I have new topics I can research, which is great. That's kind of what I like about my job. Right. We also had an email from an anonymous Canadian who gives us a little bit of an update from down there as far as the pandemic is concerned. So our anonymous Canadian says, thought you might like an update on the internment camps that the Canadian government had built. Turns out that the government may have misled people a little on the use of these internment camps when they first built them. In February, the government passed laws forcing all citizens entering Canada to spend time in quarantine facilities. I think they were originally saying it was just a certain subset, I think. Some of these facilities are camps, some are specially registered hotels. When this quarantine law was first enacted, there was quite a bit of surprise effect. People were returning to Canada and actually being forced into vans and driven to undisclosed locations. It was great fun, he says, or she, to watch the news for a few days with stories sounding very similar to abductions and spy movies. I've put he or she has provided us, they have provided us with some links. I've put them in the show notes, some wild stuff, especially like these people like being driven to some hotel and then nobody knew, like their relatives weren't told where they were. The government has since backed down a bit on the quarantine. They now require a mandatory quarantine in one of their facilities until either the test results come back negative or the 14 days have passed. They've also passed the cost of this quarantine onto the quarantined citizens. Oh, great. But have allowed the quarantine providers to pretty much charge whatever they would like for fees. We call this, in the trade, we call this a racket or a bonanza. It is not uncommon to hear of fees in excess of $1,000 a day. That's Canadian dollars, but still. If you're 14 days in quarantine, you're in the shit. I guess on the bright side, the diet they are receiving while in quarantine is helping with any obesity problems, as there are frequent reports of either no food or just the ingredients sent to the room to make your own sandwich. Great, you're paying $1,000 a day for a room, and then they don't even give you food. At any rate, the forced quarantine may soon be over. The government opposition parties are calling for it to be halted after several reports. I think I copy and pasted something. He basically, after several reports of sexual abuses by the people who run the quarantine program. Let me just fix that live on the show, because that's how we do things. After several reports of sexual abuses by the people who run the quarantine program. Yes, I think this has happened in Australia as well. It does not surprise me, because I think, there's, I know from the German experience, we don't have these camps or hotels or whatever, but we have, I read in the news recently that like this, I think one of the biggest German like security companies, like physical security providers, founded a company to provide, quote, quarantine services. So something with vaccination as well, and probably making sure people keep their quarantine. And I mean, these companies are scumbags, right? They it's like G4S and whatever. If like they hire just like brainless, like if you ever been at a rock concert, right? I once saw a guy. I nearly killed a guy. Let's put it this way: I nearly killed a guy at a Bruce Springsteen concert once, because so we had waited for about 6 hours in front of the stadium. Yeah, I'm mad, I know. And then they let some people in, and then they were running, and then they closed like a barrier inside the thing, right? So I see like this huge burly security guard in front of me, like closing this, like basically these, not really a barrier, like these, these metal fences you can put up. He closed that so people couldn't run through anymore. So basically, we were standing at the top of a huge flight of stairs that goes down to where where the football field is, whatever, that paved over where the stadium was, right? So I have this huge security guard holding like this steel barrier, and I'm on the other side of the barrier. Now, behind me are about 500 people who were running a second ago, and who basically, like, I saw the guy, I was like braking, and I was like digging my heels in, but I had like 500 people behind me pushing, right? And you can't really do something at that point. And I was getting like pushed on the security guard. And I'm like, dude, get out of the fucking way. Like, they're going to make me, we're going to trample you. I'm going to probably fall on top of you, and we're both dead. And he was like, get back. I'm like, dude, look behind me. There's like 1,000 people behind me. How can I get, like, these people are dumb, right? And these are the same people that are doing this kind of shit now. So, yeah, I'm not surprised. And I'm actually happy I don't live in Canada. I always thought Canada was kind of like a freewheeling country, but I thought that about Australia and about New Zealand as well. And like, they're shutting their country down, like, like Nazi Germany during the war. It's ridiculous. So thanks for that report. This is exactly what we need to hear. This is the kind of stuff, if you still have, I'm still interested in boots on the ground reports. I mean, like, when I talk about these topics, I talk about vaccination, stuff like that, or hacker attacks. I would like to hear from you. Like, if you have personal experience or something, like, tell me about it. That's, and if you don't want me to put it on the show, just tell me. Like, you can either be anonymous originally, or you can write me under your name, and you can request that you be anonymous. You can request that I don't talk about it on the show. I would do all of that. I'm a professional journalist. I'm very committed to my sources and keeping them secure, and, respecting their wishes. I just live by assimilating information, right? And passing that on to my listeners in this case, or my readers sometimes. And so please, if you have something to say, privatecitizen.press, please do so. And with that, I think we are done with the feedback. just quickly talk about how I survive making the show, and then I'm out of here because it is, to let you know a little secret, already almost past midnight here. I've dated the show for Wednesday, so I'm gonna just pretend I'm in an American time zone right now, and I'm gonna release it right afterwards and still pretend it's Wednesday. But if you were sitting there Wednesday evening CET and were wondering why the show was not, this is it. I had a very full day today, lots of work. Anyway, let's quickly talk about how you can support the show, because I do this for free. I do this under this for you. I do this under the so-called value for value model, which means you get it for free, and if you derive any value from it, I ask you to think about that and give me back the value you received if you want to. Completely optional. If you want to do that, you can become a patron on Patreon, because it's just easy for you, it's easy for me, and kick me $1 a month or something, and I'm happy, and you've done something good for the month, and we're both happy. If you don't like that because it's Patreon or because it's every month, you can also use PayPal. producers@fab.industries is the PayPal email address. producers@fab.industries. Early in the month, I just got my money from PayPal and from Patreon. And it's like, I can't live off that, but it's like, it's nice. I'm like, okay, cool. This work I put into this podcast is actually paying off in a way, and I really appreciate that. So if you're part of the club, you have my sincerest thanks. I appreciate it very much. Yeah, and that's about it. With that, let's wrap it up. Let's talk about the people who've supported this show and who've put it on the air and who've given me monetary value via Patreon or PayPal. I mean, if you write in, if you become a producer, that's value as well. If you give me background information, if you give me something to talk about on the show, ideas for a topic, like what Funky Duck did just there, that's just value. That helps me a lot. But anyway, the people who chipped in monetarily, Funky Duck's part of that club as well, are Georges for this episode. Georges, Butterbeans, Niall Donegan, Michael Mullen Jensen, Jonathan M. Heathy, Dave, Steve Hose, Mark Holland, Shelby Kruver, Flat, Jackie Plage, 1I11G, I always have to think with that one, Philipp Klostermann, Jaroslav Lichtblau, Kai Sears, IKN, Fadi Mansour, Dirk Didi, Michael Small, Joe Poser, Matt Jellyman, Bennett Piata, David Potter, Mika, Martin, Larry Glock, Dave Umrish, Ricky M, Drive Zero, Mr. Amish, Tobias, Avis, Jonathan Edwards, Barry Williams, Mode 7, Neil, Captain Eckhead, Sandman616, Funky Duck, and D. Thanks to all of you. Lots of you have been on, we've been in this group for ages. Most of you just, decide to help me out and then stick with it, which is amazing. I love you guys. Thank you. And gals and everybody. I love all of you. I would also like to thank my Twitch subscribers, because as I've mentioned, I stream this every week live on Twitch on Wednesday, depending on when I can get to it. Sometimes very late, like tonight. I do other stuff on there. I stream video games. Currently, I play a lot of Escape from Tarkov. It's just, you don't really escape. Spoiler. But, I also do the show and whatever. It helps out. People can subscribe to that for free if they have Prime, Amazon Prime. Then they have one free Twitch subscription via Twitch Gaming, Prime Gaming, which they can, you have to renew every month. But, if you do that, you help me out as well. You're kicking in like almost $5, which is great. So I would like to thank those people as well. So my Twitch subscribers currently are Mike the Dane, Galtaran, Sandman616, IndieGamiacs, Andy Pants, Redeemer RF, Mode 7 is unavailable, Halifa, Mode 7 today, also producing the show in the chat with some info on funny little viruses from the past. Mode 7 is unavailable, Halifa, and Al Terrestris Jim. I think it's an L. Can't really read that with this font, but I remember it was an L. Thanks to all of you. I would also like to thank Bytemark. Bytemark.co.uk. They're a UK hosting company. They've been providing the service that I use to send you podcasts, where you download the podcast from, for years now, and I appreciate that. Bytemark is Great. And with that, let's wrap it up. Let's wrap up the show. The theme song of the show is, of course, Acoustic Roots. I play that at the beginning of the show by Raoul Kabazali. But I'm going to play you out with a song called Save Me From Myself by Sven Carlson featuring Red Revision. So just so you know what you'll be listening to in a second. With that, I'm off. I still owe you an episode. I realize that. I'll be getting to that as soon as possible. You'll get an extra episode, not this coming week though, but there'll be another episode next Wednesday, probably. I'm pretty sure. I kind of promised it, so I'm trying to. Until then, hope you're safe from hacker attacks, and then the infamous Russian hackers, and maybe you're hacking a little bit yourself on the side. So good on you. Aim to misbehave once in a while. See you next week. Fab from Düsseldorf, signing off. Right. This is where we need to make a cut and fix this and turn this down a little bit, because that's fucking loud, man. Anyway, let's try that again. Didn't realize it wasn't playing the music on that screen. Thought that was a good move. It wasn't. Save me from myself. It's very appropriate. Sorry, Sorry for fucking that up. That intro screen is new, and I hadn't realized it wasn't playing the music. Anyway, where are we? Let's stop this and save for good measure. Never forget to save. Yes, and that's it for me. I will now have to get the show out very quickly, and then I still have to write a story. So I'll be I'll be working for quite some time here now. But I will raid you over, and you might have already seen who I'm going to raid you to. I'm going to raid Katie Pilot. So if you've never been on Twitch before, a raiding is when I hand you over, my audience, to another streamer. And Katie Pilot, I discovered just some time ago. She's great. She is an actual pilot. She flies A320s. And she plays Microsoft Flight Simulator on Twitch, which is great because I don't know anything about flying apart from Flight Simulator. And she actually teaches a lot of things and shows you how you actually fly things. And apparently I just looked this up, she's flying from Palma de Mallorca to Santorini, which is in Italy, I think. No, it's not. It's in Greece. Okay. It's just, I think I always make this mistake because Santorini sounds very Italian. But it's an island, apparently, in Greece. So if you're from Greece, I'm sorry. I'm an idiot. But anyway, let's rate her, and I'll be back tomorrow. I'll be streaming tomorrow about 10 hours, then all of Friday, literally all of the day. And I'll get food delivered, so I'll be there all the day. And then about 8 hours probably on Saturday, I'm going to play Microsoft Flight Simulator. I'm going to play Valheim, The Witcher. I need to finish, not finish, but continue that. The Witcher 1, that is. And I will be playing Escape from Tarkov, of course. So that'll be fun. So if you're into games, hit me up in the next few days. fab.industries/stream has the latest stream schedule. Until then, let's head over to Katie Pilot. Let me just see that I'm not misspelling that because she's not spelled like my wife. Spelled with an IE. So I don't want to get that wrong. So yeah, thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed her stream, and I hope I'll see you later. Until then, goodbye.